Can you believe it? It's been 5 years since The Walking Dead published their final comic. It would be easy for me to review what was wrong with the end, but let's do something more positive. With all the characters we met, there is some judgment for them. Are they fit and smart enough to survive a zombie apocalypse? Most are not. But it's not always what we're told or expected to believe that is really true. There are weak characters that seem strong and strong characters that seem weak. We know who makes it into Negan or Alpha's favourites, who's best for fan service, who sells more shirts and toys, who is the favourite character of which fan, who Robert Kirkman would choose for his survival team, but that's not the same question as, which one would I choose for my own survival team? If you haven't finished reading The Walking Dead and you don't want spoilers, then watch my other videos instead. If you don't think this video is going to have spoilers for the complete The Walking Dead comics, then let me enlighten you. Don't go anywhere near parts of internet that talk about a series because they are crawling with spoilers. To be clear, I am talking about comics, not television show, which I didn't even finish. So don't make arguments or reasons from that show. The comic events are what is playing. So if you disagree with what I say, only use arguments and reasons from comics. So let's begin. Past military employment doesn't count because joining a military is a very political decision. It's very common for someone to be more than fit and disciplined and brave enough, but choose not to join because if they do, they are only as honourable as the politicians. So Abraham and Mercer don't get any points for their past careers. They have to earn points the same as any other character. Same rule goes for police. Rick and Shane also have to earn points the same way as any other character because police are only as heroic as their politicians. So how do they compete in the apocalyptic world where patriotism can't help you? Let's see. Rick Grimes. Because The Walking Dead characters change, it's only fair to be clear which Rick we're talking about, so I have entered all 4. Gentle Rick, Violent Rick, Balanced Rick, and what I don't like about The Walking Dead is we have our protagonist. He has his arc over a long time. He finds balance. And then big time jump and suddenly we meet a version of him who is nothing similar to any version we've ever known. Either start the series at volume 22 or end it at 21. There is no point in these two people being the same character. How are fans supposed to like this? We like the character we've been following. Then Robert Kirkman decided to delete him and replace him with a stranger and expect us to like this new one instead. What was that about? And it gets worse, because this new guy is a scumhole. We've seen characters forced to be harsh to survive, but this guy is without sorrow. He is rude and horrible. Every time a new volume came out, I was waiting for Rick as we know him to run out of the woods, declaring he's back after all this time, point to the new guy and yell, "He's an imposter!" But by the time we finish, real Rick still hasn't shown up. Who is this scumhole and where is Rick Grimes? Wait, this isn't a review. Back to the game. The 4th Rick isn't actually a Rick. I cannot read the story with my brain pretending he's Rick. I choose to name him Ross Grimes instead. All but one of them have a big loss immediately because they only have one hand. The fact we all must accept is he is incapable of doing many duties to the able-bodied standard. Ross Grimes loses more points because he has a bad leg too. And yes, he can win fights, but not realistically. I don't care how fit he is. Someone with a missing hand and a bad leg cannot compete in an unarmed fight against 2 able-bodied adults. That is a fact. And even if he could, he can't run as far or fast with a heavy bag on anyway. so left to his own devices, he would be dead before he had the chance to fight anyway. Gentle Rick starts better because he's a good hunter. He provides many deer to his team. He deserves a congratulations. More good for him is his initiative and wisdom. He was the one who knew it was a good idea to leave Atlanta. It was foolish to wait for help that they didn't know when was coming or even if it was at all. As days became weeks, he gave up on expecting anyone to come at all, and he was proven right. Their camp was attacked because they didn't move, and Rick had every right to say, "I told you so." My only criticism to him is he shouldn't have kept this argument between him and Shane. He should have involved the entire camp. If he had, there is a chance Amy and Jim would have survived. But more about this. The only reason so many of them survived was because of Rick's idea to get guns and then the lessons he gave them all. If he had just camped out there like the rest of them, then who else would be dead too? Laurie, 7 volumes early? Carol, 6 volumes early? And how many more? For his initiative, he can have another point. And as I said, I'm not challenging the TV show's characters or their choices. On television, the argument is different. Shane has a point, and Laurie admits neither Shane nor Rick are entirely wrong. The film crew admit Rick was at least partly wrong, and he carries the guilt. In the comics, it's very clear Rick was right and Shane was wrong. How are other Ricks doing? You maybe expect Violent Rick to be better because he has adapted to this world, but actually, the point of the story was he changed too much. He became so selfish that he actually loses points for being a bad team player. He admits he would leave everyone else if Carl wanted to, and when someone shows some faith in him, he doesn't only let them down, he betrays them. Bad teamwork is a serious disadvantage. No team succeeds without quality teamwork. And if he had stayed like this by the time Saviors appeared, they would have lost. What if he killed Nicholas, who then couldn't return the mercy by saving Rick later? What if his hilltop attitude had been to dismiss it or even raid it? That's Alexandria without any allies. Violent Rick is further from making it into my team. Balanced Rick is better because he was bold against Saviors. Even though he was outnumbered, he didn't cower in fear. He only pretended to. Something Hilltop and Kingdom should have done a long time ago. He and his community got respect from their allies for their courage. Finding the bravery to face something bigger than you is exactly what preppers like to see in a teammate. It was also the wise thing to do. He says, "We cannot live by the whims of Negan. That psychopath would be the death of us all." And he's right. If Saviors had stayed in charge, then if Whisperers didn't destroy their world, they would have made a big mistake in how they meet the Commonwealth, and Commonwealth definitely would have wiped them out. Good save. Believe it or not, Gentle Rick benefits from his own empathy. It maybe isn't obvious that empathy is a survival merit, but it means you can understand your teammates better and find problems with them that they should mention but don't, or forgive their actions when you should. If Rick hadn't confronted Tyrese about cheating on Carol, even though it wasn't any of his business, she would have attempted her second suicide early. If he hadn't forgiven Herschel and returned to Green Farm, then prison would have no farm and 4 less of their best soldiers, and eventually, no one would have put gas in the generator, forcing them to deliver Judy in the pitch black, which wouldn't have been impossible since Laurie had no disease. In fact, there was a chance it would have been just fine by LaBoyer logic. But they didn't know it was going to be fine, and you can't make your decisions assuming everything will be best case scenario. That's what Shane did. So Gentle Rick, for his empathy, gets a bigger place with me. Not similar to that other character. Ross Grimes loses what little respect I had left for him for the opposite reason. He makes trouble. Because he's so nasty, he makes Alexandria a miserable place to live. When zombies sneak past one guard patrolling 8 kilometers on his own, Ross whacks his skull with a cane and shouts at him. Ross claims his patrol should take hardly any time to do. They who agree with Ross have clearly never ran 8 kilometers before. For a patrol, I estimate 8 kilometers would take an hour per length. I would like to read Ross try to do better. Not only was this too harsh, it was also ridiculous of Ross to have 8 kilometers patrolled by one person on a horse. That is too far for one person to patrol quickly. Either have more people doing the patrols so it's less distance for each one, or accept that once in a while some zombies will get through and make it every traveller's responsibility to take this risk as their own. And he makes Alexandria an unfair place to live. When Olivia, after 3 years, makes one human mistake, he threatens to banish her to the zombie wilds unless she is without mistake for the rest of her life. After all she has done right for him since the day they met, she was one of the few people who attacked Negan before the All-Out War. Yes, she should pay for her mistake, as we all should, but she doesn't deserve banishment, especially when it wasn't only her mistake, and it never should have been only her mistake, because in big, serious jobs such as this one, jobs need to be done in pairs. In case someone makes a mistake, the other can correct them. There still will be mistakes, but less often. Andrea admits she is also responsible, and Ross doesn't give half a penny. So it's a rule for one, and a different rule when it's broken by someone he sleeps with. That is the leader Ross Grimes is, not the leader Rick was. If Ross Grimes was leading a community of hundreds of copies of me, he would be uprised against within days. The only reason he kept the loyalty of his people was because Plot. But Plot doesn't let him get away with this because in the story, Dwight was the first person to confront him, and more would have joined Dwight if they had time before the end. He was losing the loyalty of his teammates. The reason for this is he was nasty. He deserves to be beaten up for it. So I will, by method of this game, beat him up. One of my favourite things about Gentle Rick is, despite being a police officer, he is still nice. He says and proves he doesn't let rules blind him to what's right and wrong, and this is one of the most important things any justice officer can have. Rick is the sort of police who never would arrest a suffragette, or charge a homosexual, or enforce a lockdown. Gentle Rick shows us the difference between a hero and a controller. Would Shane have arrested Morgan? Shane wanted control. He represented the normal police who pose as heroes, but really, they don't give half a penny if you're burgled. They want to practice power over you instead. I think Gentle Rick deserves admiration for this because governments want us to be controlled by what we believe because they try to control what we believe. If you don't believe what the government tells you, then you break out of their control. If the USA was 300 million copies of Rick, it would be a much better country. If there was enough Doc Stevens and Dwights and females to make up for all his weaknesses. This shows Rick has a special type of intelligence that can't be learnt from books or internets. It's the power of independent thought, not based on what you've been told. Preppers like this. Back to Ross Grimes making trouble. He's made more of it. His decision to mostly disarm Alexandria after the All-Out War was absurd. The reason Whisperers made such a strong effect on them so early was because Alexandria didn't have a military beyond a few basic anti-zombie guards. If he had made this decision after killing Dexter, they would have lost to Woodbury instead of a tie. If they made this decision after these guys, they would have stood no chance against Saviors, and so on. There really was no reason for Alexandria to make such a stupid move. They assumed that because they won All-Out War, there would never be an All-Out War II. The same mistake countries made after World War I. The same mistake most non-preppers made. They think human civilization gets less violent as time passes, but this isn't true at all. There isn't a limit to how many wars there can be in the future and they don't run out just because you finish one. Closing your military is simply asking for a big enemy to appear and kill lots of you. More trouble. The politics of Alexandria is ridiculous. Ross Grimes is an extreme socialist. Granted, the Commonwealth was rubbish too, but Ross Grimes can only ride a high horse so far. He insists that everyone has the same jobs, salaries, homes, wealth, and power. His irony is the same as the irony of communism. Whenever someone asks to try out and replace him as leader, he threatens to kill them. Everyone is on the same level, except for him. Eugene built a radio. Is Ross now going to force him to make a radio for everyone? Or destroy his radio so no one gets it? What if an Alexandrian renovates something and tries to profit from it? Is Ross going to stop them? What if one Alexandrian is working significantly more and longer than the others? Is that dedication going to be a punishment? Socialists talk so much about the value of workers, but not the extra hard workers. If you work 9 to 5, socialists love you. If you decide to work 2 extra nights a week to get more done, they hate you. Would I rather live in Alexandria or Commonwealth? Neither. They are both totalitarian, tyrannical places. Both are horrible to live in. I would rather take my chances in the apocalyptic danger zones. Communism and capitalism are the same thing. Final words on Rick. His arc was actually the opposite of my own in real life. When I started prepping, I was fresh out of school. Ignorant, selfish, and would have been mean if I had the chance. As I progressed my preparation for C.D.M.D, a lot of reforms came my way. It helped that I was out of school. I actually learnt from experience to become less arrogant and less aggressive and more nice and helpful. Make no mistake, I am lots more prepared for a post-apocalyptic war now than when I started, because I'm more disciplined, realistic, and open-minded. I know sometimes I am wrong, and there are many things I don't know. It's a big world out there. Last year, I told an ex-Marine about my farm, and he told me, "When the world ends, I know where to raid." Instead of talk big and threaten him, which would have caused an argument, I ended the conversation by saying, "But why attack me when I'm more useful to you as an ally? If you team up with me, I can get you vegetables every year and all the other skills I have to offer." He listened. So what I like about The Walking Dead personally is me and Rick are a mirror's picture of each other. What we both want is balance. Violent Rick liked to threaten people to scare them, but Negan appeared and wasn't scared of him. Rick learnt that all violence is not the answer. Got back pieces of gentle and found balance. You cannot survive a C.D.M.D being all nice and no harming, or by being all violent and lots of harming. We need to adapt to our situation and make the right response, and that answer will be made out of the parts of both, balanced in a healthy way. Up next is Carl, 3 of him. Mini Carl, volumes 1 to 10, Bad Carl, volumes 11 to 14, and One-Eyed Carl, volumes 15 to 32. All 3 are underage, but some are more underage than others. Mini Carl has to be watched over all the time, and when Bad Carl has to fight an adult, he can't. One-Eyed Carl actually has a lot of ages. In the main one, he runs to grab a spade instead of fight where he is. What if by the time he got back, it was too late? He wasn't mature enough to realize that sometimes you're stuck with what you have, and you have to get the job done anyway. He's kind of like my dad. One-Eyed Carl has the obvious. He's missing an eye. This is going to make him aim lots worse, and fans of zombie fiction forget that losing most body parts is not always as simple as losing a body part. It can lead to other medical problems. We're talking about veins being forced into ways they're not designed to work in, so thromboembolism is lots more likely, as is pain or weird feelings in the area around what is lost. People with missing body parts are also vulnerable to higher risk of heart malfunction and chest inflammations. So that's 3 out of 4 Ricks also suffering from medical disqualifications. My advice to people with missing body parts is take maximum care of your health to make sure your injury does not get worse, and make a plan adapted to your need with a bag of special supplies for you. For example, if you have a robot arm, have a solar-powered charger and fix-it tools in your bug-out bag. Carl's best credits are his attitudes. He's excited to learn to use a gun despite his mother's worst judgment, but mature enough to use and not use it responsibly, disproving his mother's judgment. When it's time to kill Ben, the right thing to do is to kill him. Their other options were leave him behind, which would have been cruel, or keep him until he kills someone else, which would have been unfair. But no one was willing to do it, so Carl did the selfless thing. He took the burden onto his own conscience so no one else would have to. Despite the act, there is something admirable about that. But his choices are his faults. Sneaking to Sanctuary to kill saviors was a good attitude thing to do, but his method was all wrong. He got himself surrounded and outgunned. Instead, he should have attempted to track them down and snipe them in a hit and run, then keep coming back and doing that more times. Bear in mind, he didn't know Rick and Paul were trying to do that, and didn't know for sure that Saviors had people watching over most of the city. So would I choose Carl for my team? I wouldn't choose any of them, but no one in the story did. He was either a package deal with Rick, or stuck with someone because family. So if I did have to have him in my team, the important thing would be that he's disciplined, trained, and protected as he grows. If other teammates could handle him right, he could work great with us, but I wouldn't choose him. But we have to have kids eventually, and we wouldn't choose them either. Next character, Doc Stevens. I wanted to talk about him because he's introduced in Volume 5, but this isn't the first time we hear of him. If Doc Stevens sounds familiar to you, it should, because he delivered Carl and did a cesarean on Laurie. Rick says this in Volume 1. So in Volume 5, Rick actually recognizes him. They know each other. Normally, they would say something to show they know each other, or there would be a flashback, but The Walking Dead left it hidden for you to find. So if you found it, congratulations, you're a big Walking Dead fan and a sharp detail finder. But can he survive a zombie apocalypse with me? No. His role in the story was mentor who dies, forcing the hero to continue on their own feet. That means Alice has a challenge and Doc Stevens is callous. A zombie comes from behind and he doesn't notice. His final words were the equivalent of, "I'll be right back." It's easy to think being a medic would fight his case, but that's not necessarily true. He worked in a clinic, with drawers full of drug bottles, and all the equipment he needs. In an apocalypse, it's important to be able to improvise medicine with as little tools and drugs as possible. How well would he do when someone has a bad cough and he's got no pills for it? Giving a cesarean is one thing, a good thing, but it's more important to coach a pregnancy so that surgery is not needed. Can he do that when he's not stuck in a clinic with every convenience he could ask for? So he's only getting a small compliment for that one. Negan is the character the series wants us to think is a really tough, fully qualified zombie survivor. But is he? The results of his choices led to communities uniting against him, his community cut into a quarter, nearly all his most loyal, effective soldiers killed, and betrayal from within his inner circle. then roughly 3 years prison. The only reason he survived was because of the mercy of balanced Rick, who talked lots of people out of killing him. Does this sound like a good resume to you? He wasn't defensively killing because he had no choice. He was aggressively killing because he was evil. In TV show, Rick says, "With the way you were doing things, you were bound to run into someone like me eventually." It's true, all-out war was inevitable. Realistically, it almost certainly would have gotten him killed, and it did get lots of his followers killed. I'm not following him. When people are obedient to him, their economy dies. Look at the difference between the communities in Volume 22 and what it would have been if Saviors had won. The wealth difference is huge. This is the equivalent of early camps having a Glen and 2 hunters versus starving to death long before they find their perfect base. Ross also says, "We are thriving without you." And we know why. Negan's tax without reward plan backfired by stopping growth and destroying any hope of efficiency. The reason the Allies declared war on Saviors wasn't only the murders, the taxes, or the bad economy. It's because we cannot live by the whims of Negan. That psychopath would be the death of us all. I said before, if meeting Commonwealth had been organised by Negan, they would have tried to kill someone in Commonwealth, and whether they succeed or fail, they will have to face revenge from thousands of armoured professional soldiers who cannot be fought with zombies. And if that wasn't bad enough, the distance between them means benefit to the bigger packers and the more carriages per person. Saviors wouldn't have stood a chance. Without him, it's not clear and it's never tested. Negan's big losses of trouble and poverty cost him any chance of making it into my team. And if you put him in your team, don't be surprised if he ruins your farm, kills you to claim power, and attracts hundreds of angry soldiers to your gate. Herschel comes with a problem for everything he has to offer. Yes, he's a good farmer. At his time, few others were. If they had stayed at prison, he would have saved all of them from starvation and been the foundation of their economy. Yes, he's a good medic. He saved Carl, saved his team's reputation with the RV gang by doing it. Without him, Carl would have died and Otis would have been blamed. What would that have caused? He nearly saved Alen, but failed because he found them too late. If he had been there when he was amputated, it could have been a different story, and one more teammate for a lot or even all of the rest of the series could have been a big game changer for the better. It wasn't Herschel's fault they started without him. He also saved Carol, and if Alice hadn't shown up, it would have been down to him to deliver Judy and amputate Dale. He seems like a win. But his weaknesses are, he's foolish. Rick knows immediately that keeping zombies one building away from where you sleep is a bad idea. If Tyrese hadn't been there, the argument would have gotten ugly very quickly. But if it hadn't gone wrong when it did, it would have gone wrong later. Arnold and Lacey both died, not because of a mistake they made with the plan, but because the plan was bad whether they did it good or not. If Rick hadn't stopped him, it would have killed Herschel too because he tried to kill himself. If RV Gang hadn't been there to fight zombies, who else would have died? Maggie, Rachel, Susie, Patricia, Otis, Billy? The redemption is, Herschel learns from this mistake and admits he's wrong, but then he hits Laurie and threatens to kill Rick. If he had done this one volume later, Rick would have killed him. The story here is, there's a difference between how Rick reacted to Herschel and how he reacted to Dexter, despite them both doing the same thing. Here's a question for you. Which answer was right? Because sparing and coming back for Herschel was the right thing. But could they have done that with Dexter? I doubt it. I would have killed Dexter and spared Herschel too. Another weakness is theism. This is a severe handicap in the zombie apocalypse. I know this is going to offend a lot of you God fans, but I'm going to be honest with you. Anyone can tell you what you want to hear so you like them, whether it's true or not. I'm just trying to help you survive a C.D.M.D. Take it and live, or leave it and die. Even the characters admit they don't like Christianity. They only go to their chapel to meet the new people in their community. They could do that easily without Gabriel. Belief in God has ruined families, made what would otherwise have been average countries into major awful ones, taken history's chance to be nice, helpful, productive, and cool, and wasted centuries for the purpose of oppression. And more personal to me, theism is one of the things that made school as awful as it was. People who should have been teachers decided to pretend to be priests instead. Instead of getting on with my training and coaching me into a fully qualified expert, they chased their own nonsense agenda. I cannot count the hours we wasted, while a better version would have been getting ahead. They cared more about their delusion and less about helping students, which is how you end up with schools with whole rooms, maybe even whole building, dedicated to chapels, and neglected students who learn nothing and leave school bitterly when the alternative was much better. I could go on, but I've made the point needed for today, and I've got a video to focus on. But after all that, he can have a good point for his marksman skill. He made it into Andrea's top squad, and that to me means he's skilled with a gun and a legit fighter to be taken seriously. Even if he doesn't make it all the way into my survival team. I do not choose Beta, and we don't have to talk about evil or rapist or murderer before we know why. I choose against him because his survival plan neglects essential things, and he's got no intelligence of his own. He will do whatever Alpha tells him to, breaking every rule about strength she teaches him because she says so. The Whisperers have got a number of weaknesses that mean they wouldn't thrive in a real zombie apocalypse. One of them is they don't farm. There was a time before farming, but back then, communities were small and limited. Not the size that Whisperers were. There's a reason farming was invented. It's a reliable way to get lots of quality food, and it's part of the foundation of an economy. Prehistoric people around the planet have separately chosen to invent it, and when they do, they thrive. We also don't see them renovate any factories, so don't tell me they can make as many bullets as Eugene can. Choosing to stay primitive is how people die. You need to adapt and develop. As I like to say, move forward or lose the race. Beta's other weakness is when you value strength over all else, you rob people of the chance to become strong. No one is born fit. Skills need to develop, despite what Andrea says. And if you get judged and condemned before you have the chance to practice, you will never become a valuable team player. So realistically, Whisperers would never grow their numbers, which is fine unless you want to conquer colonies. And what about when you're sick or injured? People heal, but if every time they show weakness they're killed for it, then it's only a matter of time before you all get sick. Beta didn't only blindly follow Alpha no matter what, he also forced his whole team to. When she was challenged to a fair trial by combat, he interfered so the challenger wouldn't win whether they were better than Alpha or not. Beta is the kind of guy who would keep negging either Governor, Shane, or Ross in charge. How would he treat you if you were on his team and the leader was awful? He's not very good for the team. I would rather choose Alice because her medical skill will come in handy. It's wrong to say she's too wimpy because she didn't want to cut off Dale's leg, but give her more than a few seconds of a chance. She probably would have because the alternative was let him die, and if she did let him die, I sense she would have learnt a lesson and become much less wimpy. The last other complaint is her naming plan. She prefers biters to lurkers and roamers because they all bite. It's a name for all of them. 1. They have a name for all of them. Zombies, which they have used many times despite what fans will tell you. 2. You're supposed to divide them into differences and to label them. We can call any of these a plant, but if you want people to understand you, you give them their own name. But she makes up for this nitpick. She's actually very sciencey. If someone else had given them cover and she was as lucky as Rick and Carl, I think she might have done as much good as Eugene. Bonus point for her, bravely giving them cover at her own risk. She gives a small speech about no one asking why anymore, and she's right. When everyone else was too busy killing zombies, she was the one who kept her brain on. Taking the zombie in was a good idea. She convinced Rick of that. It's not her fault Carol committed suicide with it. If luck had been different, what would they have learned? We don't know because no one ever tries this again. In the zombie apocalypse, when I'm trying to rebuild a civilization and recover its lost knowledge, I would find it much easier with her help. She even has a nice personality. When she walks in on Axel and Patricia, she decides not to be bothered. If everyone in the world was like her, it would be a better place. Before we get to our final one, let's give you something to think about the popular choices. No, I do not choose Mercer because all the fitness in the world doesn't make up for the fact that he has no initiative, which raises my doubts on his qualification as a soldier. He waits for someone such as Ross Grimes to show up before saying, "You are the leader we need." A true survivor would have found or become the leader they needed long before. No, I do not choose Abraham because being a veteran doesn't stop him rising arguments. He wants to kill Maggie, he gets angry when Rick wants to go to his old town, he upsets Dale within minutes of meeting him, he's angry at Rick maybe leaving with a tent. I want a team player who cooperates. The size of your team is only as good as the teamwork. But to be fair, the story goes that once you get to know him, he's a lot easier to get along with. Rosita spent lots of time with him, and she backs him up. So once I get to know Abraham, it would be a different story, but at the start, I want to hold him for review. No, I do not choose Morgan because surviving on his own doesn't make him independent because it costs him his sanity. Spending time with other people and even getting a relationship doesn't seem to cure him. Insanity does not only affect you, it can spread to your teammates and can ruin your role in the community and the community itself. You have a duty to your team to keep your brain functioning correctly. You might think I'll definitely choose Andrea because she's such an amazing shot in guns and basketball, but it's not actually a simple question because the only reason she's a good shot is because she's a Mary Sue. A character with a skill, but without the practice in their backstory to explain their skill. She admits this many times, and I have a question for you. Apart from being a perfect shot and good at basketball, what does she offer? Laundry? I guess she is skeptical. But not much to offer, really. I know that everyone has got at least one talent that they are automatically good at without practice. For me, it's holding onto an inflatable while the boat driver is trying to throw me off. But that's nothing to be impressed by. What I look for is skills that are earned because that's where we see effort and discipline. How many times did Andrea demonstrate a long-term effort and discipline that grew a skill she could use to benefit her team? I do not choose Michonne. Yes, she's strong, we know from her weightlifting scenes. Independent, we know from when she went out with Rick and Glenn and she explained her survival rules, and she is often the first one they ask for help killing zombies. But they ask her because she has a sword. Michonne's character and survival relies on her sword. It's the most iconic part of her. Take away the sword, what is she? She admits that if any other character had a sword, they would be the first to be asked for help killing zombies. When she tries to chase Woodbury after an attack on prison, she admits she made herself and Tyrese absolutely vulnerable to traps. That plan gets Tyrese killed, herself separated, and Rick comments her idea was wrong. During the plan, she got within stabbing distance of Governor Phillip, had a gun to the back of his head, and he still survived. Michonne is incapable of killing that guy. When she has a sword, him tied, nailed, and restrained, a few seconds to do something, instead of stab him in the lungs, she cuts his thigh and runs. Woodbury's medic believed she had let him live on purpose, when really she didn't. She had no idea if she succeeded in killing him or not. She got other characters killed too. Seducing Tyrese, knowing full well he had a girlfriend, and doing it in a place they could be seen was a nice idea. How? Was Michonne thinking about the feelings of others when she called Carol a scrawny white bitch? To her defense, she does help save Carol from her first suicide attempt, and to her defense, next time she does this, she waits until a relationship is breaking down before she seduces someone. When she's finished with romance, she goes to Commonwealth and shows another side of her character. She's selfish, biased, and gullible. When a judge doesn't let the opponent lawyer speak, she smiles because she knows she has a cheat on him whether he has more good points or not. She accepts a big apartment for a bargain, knowing full well she doesn't deserve it. She could have chosen a smaller apartment and let someone who deserves it more have it. So giving that family the cheese is a very small act. She's not interested in building up or fair play or earning reputation. As soon as someone was going to steal it from someone else, she was perfectly happy to have it for free. So ask yourself, if she was on your team, how long until she abandons you for a bribe? She was going to leave them all to go to Alexandria if they didn't follow her. What if Alexandria was actually the Saviors? She joined Commonwealth. Would she have joined Saviors too? And when she's a judge, she rushes laws out, just to save someone she likes at the price of people who she chose not to give a voice to. In Michonne's mind, it's a rule when she wants it, a different rule when she wants to break it. Why in the universe is Commonwealth letting one judge make a law so fast with no warning, and just like that? Do you see why she makes trouble? Without her sword, how much trouble would she stop to make up for it? Give someone else a sword, they could do the same. And yes, gathering useful supplies such as a sword is important, but it's more important to be able to do more with less. Shiva is a very strong, very fast, stealthy, armed with claws and jaws, and tame teammate. Ezekiel admits he couldn't stop her overpowering him and eating someone. The reason she doesn't is because she's nice. It's also hard for enemies to sneak up on you because Shiva has the best hearing of all the characters, 6 times better than anyone else's. And when it's time to farm, she's good at pest control. Just don't let her near your livestock. And she can eat zombies, so you don't even need to worry about one more body to feed because there is always plenty just for her. But she's not very good in a war. For that, it's better to leave her at home or the sidelines. But on that note, how does something so strong, fit, and armed lose a fight against something so weak, slow, and unskilled, even with a lot of them? That wasn't the character's fault, it was the script's. But she possibly would have been shot anyway. So yes, Shiva's a good choice, if you give her the right role. And yes, she does count as a character. And finally, the one who I think is the most underrated but a top choice for a survival team, out of all characters of The Walking Dead, Eugene. But which one? Fatty Eugene, Fit Eugene, or Old Eugene? The only 2 criticisms are, Fatty Eugene is an uglo-fatso blob monster, so not him, but he loses weight. Not in time before the series loses it, but that's not his character's fault. The other is, Old Eugene is too old. The qualities of Fit Eugene and Old Eugene. very healthy, he lives to an ancient age and shows no signs of dying soon, this matters because every disease is a weakness. He says he's sick, but he's still working and walking, so I take that as being humble. Chemist skill. We see when he makes bullets. The fact is, you can't make a bullet just by moulding lead into a shape. You also need charcoal, potassium nitrate, sulfur, and for the primer, magnesium and ferrocerium are options. But we'll let him off because he's a cartoon character and he got it working in his cartoon world. If he was real, he would have got it working in the real world. Tech skill. We see when he builds a radio, which is nowhere near as simple as it looks. Here is a list of things to think about when making a radio if you want it to work perfectly. For context, if I was to revise all my radio notes and book and had all the supplies and time I needed, I could probably only make a basic one, but we couldn't have a conversation on it, or even use it as a controller. We would only be able to send each other a simple noise. Hard-working. He works until he collapses and then gets up and doesn't stop. This is good because in an apocalypse, hard work is the new money. Humble. This matters because arrogance leads to less thought and dumber judgment. He is not only a nice guy to have around, he's also a survival advantage. He brings value to any team he's on. I don't know why he lied in the beginning. If he had run into me, I would have been convinced to take him to District of Columbia by his truth. Eugene means your team will develop and thrive when that is not true for so many characters, many of who will get you killed or steal the credit you deserve. So here's who I pick for my team out of the Walking Dead characters. Gentle Rick, because Balanced Rick is medically disqualified. Alice, Shiva, Eugene, and because there are so many characters, there is probably a great candidate who I haven't checked yet, waiting to make it into my team in a future video. Who do you think they'll be? For example, you notice I haven't added a member for their special zombie killing reputation. Which of them do I choose? I'll leave that for a future video. Remember, surviving the zombie apocalypse is so much more than killing zombies. You need a good attitude, wide insight, persistence, hard work, health, and to keep learning. I will see you in the apocalypse. Next video, how to survive airborne plague. I mean it this time. These anniversaries and deadlines have had me working my back off. Some times of the week, my brain hurts because I've been working until midnight too many times. Other projects have suffered delays. Next deadline is a big time away. From now on, I'm going to be in front of them. So next video is what I plan for it to be. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this or found it helpful, then click like and comment so I know to make more of this. If you're one of a group of Walking Dead fans, share this video with your fan club and see who argues with what. And maybe you want to argue for yourself, in which case you maybe want to watch this video a few more times so you really learn the case. If you want to see more, click my channel name or icon for more. I will see you next time. And subscribe to survive.